Hi guys, advance apologies for throwing you quickly into this shot, but as you will have noticed, it's snowed, and we don't get snow down this close to the coast in Northumberland that often, so I'm keen to make the most of it, but I think it's going to disappear quite quickly. Now I'm back at my local woodland, which is quite good because it means I've got a rough idea of what I actually want to do with it. Never underestimate how important it is to have a local patch that you can just return to in any weather conditions and just go and try new stuff out, or literally, if the weather conditions are interesting, just get there and take something. I wasn't planning to go out today. I woke up and there was snow, so here I am. Okay, so I'm going to work quite quick here. The sun is rising. Basically, you can see I'm focusing on the tree. You can see the focusing point there flashing on, and you should be able to see my histogram. Now at the moment exposure compensation is on 0, and what I want to try and do is, because we've got some snow in the scene, is I want to try and move that histogram until it's grouped a little bit more to the right. Perhaps like that, 'cause that's probably, because basically your histogram is a representation. The left hand side is your darks, the centre is your mid-tones, and the right hand side is your bright areas. Now if you've got snow in a scene, you would expect there to be more bright areas than normal, and actually that's looking quite nice. So we'll check the histogram actually on the actual final image. Now you can see, even though I've given it 2/3 of a stop extra, there's still no true white there, which you would expect, because you expect some white in the scene. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to take that shot again on a 3-second self timer. Again, if you look at it, you can see whilst it is grouped a little bit further to the right, it's still not sort of drastically overexposed. And that's simply because, as a golden rule, if you're photographing snow, what you want to do is you want to give it an extra stop of exposure compensation. So always dial in +1. But the key is really to check your histogram. Your histogram is your best friend in these sort of circumstances. Now, I think I'm going to try fitting the polarising filter, see if that makes much of a difference. As I say, this was a totally unplanned trip. I was actually planning on going to the city today. I think I've made the right decision. It would help if I fit the right filter though. Right, so let's have a look. I'm just going to turn the polarizer, see if it makes much of a difference. It may not. It's always interesting if you watch the histogram, see what the histogram's doing. I don't know, I think it could be a slight difference. So yeah, I think that's quite a nice start to the day, and I'll put the shot on the screen for you now. Right, so I'm just going to turn the camera off. Always a good idea when changing lenses. I believe that you're more prone to get sensor dust if you leave your camera switched on because there's still electricity going through the sensor. I could be wrong, I'm not a geek. But I always do that and I don't have too much of an issue with sensor dust, so hey ho, perhaps I'm doing something right. And then it's a case of trying to keep that switch as quick as possible. And basically I've switched to the little 35 to 100, so it's what a 70 to 200 equivalent. A lens I don't use very often, but what I want to try and do is I want to try and get a sort of an abstract shot of the snow on the branches of the trees over there. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to switch it to live view and I'll talk you through what I'm actually doing with my composition. And hopefully you can see exactly what I'm attracted to. And basically it's all to do with these branches here. I think the snow on them is quite interesting, so it's going to be quite abstract. You see, I'm quite liking this group of trees here, and obviously these two here, but I don't like this one coming down there. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to try and move around a little bit to try and get rid of it, which may be hard, but I'm going to give it a try. As you can see from the screen, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to basically calm all this chaos. As I say, I don't use this lens very often. I'm using it what? I'm using it 200mm, which is interesting. F8. Now the histogram, if you look at the histogram, I'm bringing that back down a touch. So that's at 0, which is see, if we rank it straight up to +2, you can see that's obviously overexposed. +1 is going to get some really nice bright whites. Now the thing is, I'm shooting raw, so I do have a bit of wiggle room, and basically as long as I'm not drastically overexposed or underexposed, I can pull it back. But what I will do probably is introduce noise, so it's a good idea to get close as possible in camera as opposed to trying to fix it later. Now if you're slightly over, as long as your highlights aren't clipping, which is why your histogram is so important, as long as your highlights aren't clipping, then you can put it back and you can have no loss of quality. But if I'm going totally underexposed and I sort of increase it, then the shadow, when you increase shadow detail, then you'll introduce noise, and that's something I'm really keen to not introduce, especially with a little micro four third sensor. So let's have a look at the histogram on that shot. Again, he's looking fine. We've got lots of mid-tones and we've got a little bit going to the right. If anything, it probably is slightly underexposed. I probably could give it a little bit more exposure, but ultimately that's fine. I think we're close enough there. But of course, wouldn't it be nice if we could have some sort of visual representation that it's actually overexposed when we're looking through the EVF, and luckily we can. I'm going to quickly show you how we do it on the Lumix. Menu. So I've got histogram on live. Blinking highlights on. Right, it may be called something different on your camera. But now, theoretically, if I start increasing the exposure, and we press play, you will see all the flashing there. That means that's the point where it's totally lost information. So as you can see, you've got a lot of wiggle room there that you could actually take your exposure right up. Now it is possible on a lot of cameras to have this actually in the live view. I'm sure it is on this one. But to be honest, I'm going to concentrate more on the photo. So I'm going for +2 thirds of stop. I've got two people walking through the frame, which I don't want, so I'm just going to let them go. 3-second self timer, and I'll put the shot on the screen now. Right, I've got a bit of a Marmite shot going on here. I can't decide if I love it or hate it, to be honest. As you'll see, basically it's a very simple composition. I think what's quite attracted me, these little bit of autumn colours and the nice big trees behind. I don't know. I'm not 100% taken. But as we're here and we've got a bit of snow, what's the harm really? So we're shooting at 70mm, which is about 140 full frame equivalent, f8 100 per second, ISO 200 on a tripod, obviously. 3-second self timer. It's focusing okay. I'm going to be really interested to see how this lens performs. Yeah, I'll put the shot up for you. Back in the days of film, I remember it was my first ever around the world trip, and we went to Hawaii. It was the first stop off, and basically we hiked out and we were photographing some lava, flowing lava. Probably quite dangerous looking back at it, but hey ho, I was in my 20s, you know. But anyway, all of the shots were drastically underexposed, and I was shooting slide film, and I didn't get one. Not one single shot was any good. Now, if I went with a digital camera, what I would have done is I would have taken a shot and I would have checked my histogram, and I would have known for sure if the shots were underexposed or underexposed. Anyway, let's quickly set this shot up, and then I'll quickly talk you through what you need to keep an eye out for with your histogram. Right, you've probably noticed I've actually ended up moving a little bit. I wasn't happy over there. There's a couple of trees in the way that I just couldn't get around, so I quite like this composition. I'll put my glasses back on and you're back on live view. Right, so as you can see from the screen, I quite like the snow at the front, the snow covered bushes, they're quite nice. I'm not too keen about this tree over here. I think it's a pleasant enough shot, but it's not amazing. Now you can see the difference the polarizing is making there. If you look in the left hand corner here, you see the difference it makes there? But the problem is because the right hand side over here has got cloud, it's not doing a uniform change in the sky, is it? Well, it will be, but it's just the fact that it doesn't look like it is. So I'm going to bring it back to about there, keep a bit of colour but not too drastic. Right, put my hood back on, and I'm going to take the shot 2 stops under, and I want you to look at that histogram in the right hand corner there. 1 stop under, and all I want you to do basically is look at the histogram, see what the histogram's doing, because I want you to get an idea. 0, so that's what the camera's recommending. Now interesting, if you look at the histogram again, you'll see that there's actually more darks and midtones than there are sort of the bright whites. And if you look at the snow at the front here, the snow's not looking white, the snow's actually looking quite grey. Now this is because your camera is metering for mid-tone grey, so it gets confused when it sees something white or it sees something black. So if you're photographing something light or white, you generally want to give it exposure compensation of 1 to 2 stops. Conversely, if you're photographing something dark or black, you want to give it exposure compensation of -1 to -2 stops. Now with your histogram you can see what's happening. So there, that was the 0. And we can tell that we need more. And now at +1 you will see straight away that basically it's grouped to the right hand side and it's starting to clip right on the edge. Now if we look at that little photo I just took there, and can you see the flashing highlights? Now the histogram has basically pointed out that we are right on the edge and that we probably are going to get some clipping. By pressing the blinking highlights on the preview image, we can see that where it's flashing is actually the sky, but still as snow at the front it's got the slightest of a flashing, but really nothing drastic. So sometimes you have to use your common sense. Just because your histogram says you're losing some information somewhere, keep in mind where it's losing that information. If it's losing information in a bland white sky, then there's nothing there anyway. But as a rule of thumb, you don't want that. So we go back and look at our histogram, and you can see that it is clipping right on that edge. So using exposure compensation, bring it back slightly. So the histogram coupled with your blinking highlight, and we can see the sky is still going. And now you're still getting a slight bit, but I think overall what the histogram is telling us is basically that we have got enough information there. Now if we had a histogram that looks a bit like this, with that huge spike on the right hand side, we would know that we're losing a lot of information. Future me is going to jump in at this point, because it did occur to me that I didn't fully explain what you should do if basically your histogram is grouped too far to the right, i.e. overexposed, or grouped too far to the left, i.e. underexposed. Now it's quite simple. Think about this as like doing cooking and weighing ingredients. If you group too far to the left, you need to add some light to the right hand side to balance it all up. So basically you haven't got enough light, so you need to add some by using exposure compensation. Likewise, if you group too far to the right, so it's overexposed, what you need to do is take some of that light away. So use your exposure compensation and basically underexpose it, so take light away, so you know, go to your minuses, and then all you're trying to do is just get a perfect balance, and to ultimately try and get a nice distribution from the left hand side of the histogram to the right hand side of the histogram. Normally you'd look for some darks, a lot of some light, and lots of nice mid-tones in between, but obviously in situations like snow and things like that, you're just not going to get that. The best way of learning your histogram is just to take lots of photos and keep checking it, and then in different scenarios you'll get an idea what's going on. Anyway, I'll drop you back into the video. Even though if you look at the actual file, there's still so much there you can work with. But the point is, you want to try and get the optimum exposure, and really, whilst the histogram is not the be and end all, what it does do, it means you can get the optimum exposure. You can get your exposure virtually there. You can get it as accurate as you can possibly get it, and then you've got a good file to start work with. As I said, histogram is a photographer's best friend. And that's it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this rare dose of snow in South Northumberland. It's not very often we get snow like this so close to the coast, so it's always a pleasure to go out and photograph it. I think there's a couple of takeaways from this video. Basically, it's always a good idea to have a local patch that you can get to quickly just to take photos in whatever conditions. And it's also a good idea when you're doing this to practice using your histogram, practice reading it, get into the habit of checking it. And really, you will never go wrong with your exposures. You'll always know if you're virtually there, and you'll also always know you've done the best you can do, and surely that has to be a good thing. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do give it a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you again soon for another one. Thanks for watching.